The Sea and the Beginning of the Voyage. The sea was quiet tonight, a wide, endless blue that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the sky. The great wooden ship floated gently upon the surface, its sails pale under the silver light of the moon. Each wave rose and fell like the slow pulse of something vast and calm. Lanterns glowed softly along the deck, their lights swaying with the motion of the ship. Wood creaked, ropes hummed faintly, and above it all stretched a canopy of stars, steady, patient, eternal. The sailors moved quietly, their voices low, their footsteps light, as though they feared to disturb the silence of the ocean. For months they had lived within this sound, the rhythm of water, the whisper of wind. Every sunrise painted the deck with gold, and every sunset folded them back into darkness. The sea had become their world, and the sky their map. No city stood behind them now, only memory, softened by distance. They had come to follow the heavens, to trace the passage of distant lights, and to measure the secrets of the moving stars. Each night they watched, wrote, and waited, explorers not of land, but of the quiet between constellations. The world around them seemed endless, but their purpose was small and precise, as fragile as ink upon a chart, and still they drifted onward toward a place they could not yet imagine. Far off, a faint fragrance touched the wind, something warm, something sweet. It came and went like a memory too soft to hold. Soon there would be land again. Soon the horizon would bloom green beneath the sun, but for now there was only the ship, the stars, and the steady, endless breathing of the sea. The moment when the story gently unfolds. The island appeared first as a shimmer on the horizon, a quiet promise wrapped in mist. As the ship drew nearer, the air changed, heavier with scent, softer with warmth. Palm leaves moved slowly in the wind, and the shoreline glowed in morning light. This was Tahiti, bright, alive, and gentle. To weary eyes it looked like peace made real. The islanders came in small canoes, smiling, calling, offering fruits and flowers that glistened with dew. Their laughter mingled with the sound of waves, effortless and free. The British sailors watched in awe. After months of salt and silence, this world seemed to move with its own quiet harmony. Here, the air carried kindness. Here, time itself slowed to the rhythm of the sea. The first exchanges were simple: food, trinkets, tools. Among them were small pieces of iron, nails, hooks, bits of metal that shone brightly in the sun. The Tahitians were fascinated by them, for such materials were rare upon their island. A new kind of curiosity began to form, quiet, human, and unhurried. In those gentle moments of trade and laughter, the great voyage met its turning point. No longer just explorers of stars, the sailors found themselves adrift between two worlds, one of science and navigation, and another of warmth, touch, and simple human connection. And the sea, ever patient, watched it all in silence. Drifting Dream, a Sea Lullaby. The sea is quiet tonight. Its voice is low and round, moving in slow circles beneath the moon. The water glows like liquid glass, and the ship drifts gently, rocking as though held in the hands of sleep itself. Above, the stars shimmer softly, each one a lantern lit by distant dreams. The wind hums through the sails, slow and tender, like a mother's song meant for the deep. A soft wave kisses the side of the ship. Another follows, calm and kind. Together they whisper old stories to the wood, tales of islands and clouds, of time that does not hurry. The world seems to sigh as if it too is ready to rest. The night folds its wings, wrapping sea and sky in silver light. The sailors sleep beneath the stars, their breaths steady, their hearts at ease. The ocean cradles them with care, its rhythm as gentle as a heartbeat. In their dreams, they walk barefoot along quiet shores where palm leaves murmur and flowers glow in the dusk. They hear laughter somewhere far away, light and distant, carried by the breeze. The ship floats on light as a memory. The moon drifts lower, its reflection rippling like silk across the waves. Nothing stirs, nothing breaks the calm. Only the sea, only the stars, only the slow turning of the earth beneath them. And as the world breathes in sleep, the ocean whispers once more, a lullaby made of wind and tide, of silence and silver light. Rest now, drift now, dream now, until morning comes soft and golden across the endless sea. The voyage continues, day after day, at sea. The days moved quietly upon the water. Each morning, the same soft line of light appeared along the horizon, and the sun rose slowly, as if reluctant to disturb the calm that had settled across the endless sea. The ship drifted in steady rhythm, the wooden hull sighing with each movement of the tide. There was no rush, no hurry, only the gentle turning of time. The sailors awoke to the faint call of ropes and the low creak of timber. The air was cool, brushed with salt and the promise of another long, even day. They moved about the deck with simple purpose, their tasks small, their motions practiced and calm. A rope tied here, a sail adjusted there, the sound of wood meeting wood, of water touching water. Everything was measured, quiet, and predictable. Nothing demanded thought, everything flowed in a familiar pattern. Breakfast was plain and light. Hard bread softened in water, a sip of something sweet if it could be spared. They ate without complaint, seated along the deck, watching the shimmer of light dancing upon the waves. The horizon stretched endlessly in all directions, an unbroken circle of blue. The world seemed to breathe in rhythm with the ship itself. As the sun climbed higher, the wind shifted, and the sails billowed gently. Some days the air carried warmth, other days it cooled the skin like a whisper. The sky changed color hour by hour, from pale rose to clear gold, then to the endless calm of midday. There was no land in sight, only clouds drifting slowly, painting long shadows across the surface of the sea. The ship followed its own pulse, steady and sure, never fighting, only moving with the tide. The men spoke little. Words felt heavy here, unnecessary in the wide openness of water. A nod, a glance, a quiet smile were enough. The ocean provided its own conversation, the faint hum of wind in the sails, the splash of foam against the hull, the occasional cry of a bird gliding low, following the ship's path for a while before vanishing into light. The silence was deep but kind. It did not weigh upon them, it soothed them. By noon, the deck grew warm beneath bare feet. The smell of tar, salt, and sun-bleached rope mingled gently in the air. A few sailors rested in the shadow of the mast, eyes half closed, listening to the endless hush around them. The sea glittered like glass, and every reflection shimmered with slow, hypnotic motion. Time slipped quietly between moments. No one counted the hours anymore. There was only the steady repetition of day turning to day, and the comfort of knowing that nothing hurried them forward. Sometimes a gentle rain passed, soft drops tapping against the sails, cooling the deck, leaving behind a faint scent of freshness. The men would stand still, letting the rain wash the salt from their skin, eyes closed, breathing deeply. When the clouds drifted on, the sunlight returned with a new warmth, and the ocean shimmered once more, peaceful and unending. Afternoons came softly, almost unnoticed. Shadows lengthened, the wind changed direction. The ship responded with a faint groan, its great body alive yet calm. One sailor charted stars upon paper, his hand slow and careful. Another checked the ropes, humming a quiet tune without words. Some polished metal fittings until they shone faintly in the dimming light. Each task was small but steady, enough to fill the hours, enough to keep the mind at rest. As evening approached, the color of the sea deepened. The sky turned from gold to amber, then to the soft gray of twilight. The air cooled, brushing gently against their faces. The ship's lanterns were lit, one by one, their flames swaying gently like small suns born for the night. Dinner was shared in silence, simple and warm. Someone laughed softly. Someone yawned. Voices rose and fell like waves, never loud, never sharp. When darkness settled fully, the stars unfolded across the heavens. They appeared not suddenly but gradually, one after another, until the sky was filled with countless quiet lights. The men tilted their heads upward, watching them with calm familiarity. Each star had a name, a place, a distance they could trace by memory. They marked the ship's position by those points of light, their fingers moving gently across worn charts. The ocean mirrored the sky so perfectly that the world above and below became the same. It felt as though they sailed through the stars themselves, adrift between reflections. The night carried a deep stillness. Only the sound of water moving endlessly against wood broke the silence. It was not a lonely sound, and it was steady, kind, like the heartbeat of something ancient. In their hammocks, the sailors rocked softly with the motion of the ship. The rhythm of the sea became the rhythm of their breath. Sleep came not suddenly, but slowly, gently, like fog drifting in from the horizon. Sometimes, far away, lightning flickered within clouds, not fierce, only distant, like a lantern behind a curtain. It lit the sky in silence and faded again, leaving the stars untouched. The air carried a coolness that wrapped around the deck, calming every sound. Even the ropes seemed to rest. The voyage continued, but no one thought of distance anymore. There was only this: water, sky, and the faint scent of salt. At dawn, when the first pale light appeared again, it was as though nothing had changed. The horizon glowed faintly. The ship exhaled a long sigh through its timbers. One by one, the men awoke, stretching quietly, speaking in low tones. The day began again as it always did, calm, steady, and slow. They had learned the rhythm of the sea, and the sea had learned the rhythm of them. There was comfort in this repetition. No destination pressed upon their thoughts. No storm troubled their hearts. Every moment was the same, and in that sameness lay peace. They had become part of the ocean's pattern, breathing when it breathed, resting when it rested. Above them, the sun rose once more, patient and gentle. Below, the deep waters turned in slow, soundless circles. And so, another day began, indistinguishable from the last, yet perfect in its quiet balance. The ship moved forward without struggle, gliding upon the great body of the sea. The men watched, listened, and breathed, letting the ocean hold them in its endless cradle. Each sound, each shimmer, each heartbeat of the waves folded into the next, a single soft motion that carried them onward, farther from land, deeper into calm. Time, somewhere, still existed. But here, upon the open water, it no longer mattered. Only the sea, the wind, and the steady, peaceful drift remained. Landfall. The green glow of Tahiti. The night was fading softly. A hush settled across the deck, like the last sigh of a long dream. The sky above the ship carried a faint trace of silver, the kind of light that lives just before dawn. The sea was calm, breathing slowly, its surface smooth as glass. Each wave moved with the gentleness of a sleeping heartbeat. From high above, the lookout rubbed his tired eyes. The world was a blur of blue and grey. Then, through the mist, he saw something new. A colour that did not belong to sea or sky. It was green, faint at first, then deepening with each passing moment. A whisper of land. He leaned forward, steadying himself against the wind, and watched it grow clearer. His voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried through the dawn. Land ahead. The words drifted across the deck, waking those still half asleep. One by one, the sailors stirred, stretching their arms, blinking toward the horizon. The captain stepped out from his cabin, coat unbuttoned, eyes soft with wonder. Through the morning haze, he saw it. The curve of mountains, the shimmer of trees, and the gentle rise of smoke from somewhere unseen. It was not just land, it was color, scent, and promise. The ship slowed, its sails relaxing like wings finding rest. Water lapped against the hull in quiet rhythm. The air was different here. Warmer, scented, full of life. A sweet fragrance moved across the deck. Flowers, fruit, the damp breath of forest soil. The men inhaled deeply, as though they had forgotten how air could smell. They stood along the rail, silent, smiling without words. Tahiti waited ahead, rising from the sea like a dream made of green and gold. The morning sun touched the tops of the palms, and the island seemed to glow from within. Mist drifted along the slopes, curling around the high mountains before dissolving into light. The sight was so calm, so complete, that even the waves seemed to hush. Small boats appeared near the shore, moving easily upon the tide. In each one were islanders, paddling with slow, graceful strokes. Their bodies shone in the light, flowers crowned their hair. They called out softly, voices carrying across the water like birdsong. There was no fear in their eyes, only welcome. The sailors leaned over the railing, waving, smiling back. After so many months surrounded by water, the sight of other people, moving, laughing, alive, felt almost unreal. The canoes glided closer. One man stood upright, balancing as if born to the motion of the sea. He held a bundle of bright fruit, yellow, red, and orange, glowing like small suns. He lifted them high, offering them to the strangers on the great wooden ship. A rope was lowered. Hands reached down, careful and curious, and drew the gift upward. The sailors laughed softly, the sound gentle and surprised. In return, they lowered small treasures, bits of metal, beads and ribbons. Light caught the objects and flashed across the waves. The islanders clapped their hands and called in delight. It was the simplest trade, and yet it felt like ceremony. The fragrance grew stronger as the ship drew nearer. The scent of blossoms drifted like music, weaving through the air. Seabirds circled overhead, dipping their wings, then vanished toward the hills. Everything moved slowly, peacefully, in rhythm with the tide. Anchors dropped with muted splashes. Ropes were tied. The ship came to rest, rocking gently on the soft water. For a long moment, no one spoke. They simply looked at the island, at the light, at the way the sun touched everything with quiet gold. Then came the order to lower the boats. The sailors climbed down one by one, their movements unhurried. The oars dipped into the water without sound. Tiny ripples spread outward, glimmering and fading. Each stroke brought them closer to the shore, to the green world waiting beyond. The closer they came, the more the land revealed its colors. Leaves shimmered in every shade of green. Flowers leaned from branches, heavy with dew. The air was thick with warmth and birdsong. Far inland waterfalls flashed like ribbons of glass. The men stared in silence, afraid that any word might break the spell. When the boat's keel touched sand, a hush fell. They stepped out slowly, boots sinking into the soft, warm beach. The sand was smooth and pale, fine as flour. It clung to their hands when they knelt to touch it, cool beneath the surface. For months they had felt only the shifting deck beneath them. Now the solid earth steadied their bodies, grounding them in stillness. Some laughed softly, a sound like relief. Others simply breathed, feeling the land beneath their feet. The islanders waited nearby, smiling, their eyes bright with curiosity. They spoke in voices that rolled like water, gentle and melodic. Even without understanding the words, the sailors felt their kindness. Baskets were offered, filled with fruit, with flowers, with shells that caught the light. The sailors accepted them, bowing awkwardly, offering small gifts in return. The exchange was light, effortless, guided only by goodwill. Around them the island shimmered, palms moved slowly in the breeze. Butterflies drifted through shafts of light. Children ran along the sand, leaving trails of laughter. The sea murmured behind them, folding against the shore with patient rhythm. A few sailors wandered toward the edge of the forest. The air grew cooler there, fragrant with leaves and damp earth. Birds sang from hidden branches. Insects hummed a low harmony. Every sound blended together, not loud, but steady, like the pulse of something living. It felt as though the entire island breathed in unison, calm and content. They stopped beside a stream that trickled over smooth stones. The water was clear enough to show the sky reflected beneath their feet. One man knelt, cupped his hands and drank. It was sweet and cold, tasting of rain. He smiled without speaking. The captain stood near the water's edge, watching. Behind him, the ship rested quietly on the horizon. Before him, the island stretched wide and green. He closed his eyes for a moment and listened. Waves, wind and birds, no machinery, no shouting, only nature's slow rhythm. It was peace without thought. The sailors gathered near a cluster of palms resting in the shade. They shared fruit offered by the islanders, soft, bright, full of sweetness that melted upon the tongue. Juice ran down their fingers, sticky and warm. They laughed, gentle laughter, carried away by the breeze. No one spoke of the journey or the months behind them. The past dissolved in sunlight. High above, clouds drifted lazily around the mountain peaks. Their shadows moved across the valley like slow waves. Occasionally a bird cried, a clear sound that echoed once and was gone. The island seemed endless in its calm. Time slipped unnoticed. The sun climbed higher, soft light turning to gentle heat. The smell of salt gave way to flowers. The men stretched out upon the sand, closing their eyes, letting the sound of the tide lull them. The rhythm of the ocean matched the rhythm of their breathing. Each exhale carried away the weight of travel. Each inhale filled them with stillness. The islanders continued their easy movements, collecting shells, tending fires, singing in tones that floated just above the whisper of waves. Their presence felt natural, like the trees or the sea itself. Nothing rushed. Nothing demanded attention. Everything simply existed. The captain walked along the beach, leaving shallow footprints that the tide quickly erased. He felt the sun upon his face, the cool breeze against his hands. Every sense was quiet, open, unguarded. He stopped and looked toward the horizon where the sea met the sky. The ship was still there, a dark line against the brightness, patient and unmoving, but it no longer seemed distant. It belonged to this moment, part of the same calm. By late afternoon, the light began to soften again. The shadows lengthened, the air turned golden. Voices grew fainter as the day sighed into evening. The islanders lit small fires near the shore. Smoke rose in thin ribbons, carrying the scent of wood and fruit into the cooling sky. The sailors sat beside them, watching the colors fade from orange to rose to blue. No one spoke of departure. No one thought of time. There was only the sound of the sea folding upon itself, again and again, never ending, never hurried. The flames danced softly, casting light upon their faces. In the distance, waves glowed faintly beneath the moon's first light. Night returned as gently as morning had begun. Stars bloomed overhead, reflected in the quiet water. The sailors lay upon the sand, eyes half closed, listening to the soft chorus of the island, the rustle of leaves, the sigh of the tide, the distant hum of insects. Sleep came easily, drawn in by the warmth of the earth and the softness of air. They dreamed of green hills and silver streams, of the scent of flowers carried by wind. And above them, the island breathed, slow, steady, eternal. Life on the island. Days of calm. The days on the island unfolded with a quiet grace, each one beginning in the hush of dawn when the sky turned a pale shade of gold and the palms stirred as though waking from a long dream. The air was gentle, filled with the scent of salt and fruit, and the sea shimmered with colors that seemed to change with every breath of wind. The sailors rose slowly, unhurried, their bodies rested, their minds light, the long weariness of months at sea slipping from them like mist. They walked along the shore where the sand was soft and cool beneath their feet, and they watched the water move in easy rhythm, a steady heartbeat against the island's calm. The people of Tahiti greeted them with smiles that needed no translation, carrying baskets of fruit and jars of clear water, offering flowers woven into delicate chains that glowed in the morning light. The air was filled with laughter. low, musical, without effort. And the sailors answered with gestures, nods, and the simple joy of being understood without words. There was no urgency here, no command shouted over wind or wave, no sound of the ship's ropes straining or the deck creaking beneath heavy boots. Everything moved in balance. The island breathed with them. When the sun climbed higher, they sat beneath the shade of palms, their backs resting against the trunks, still damp with morning dew. They shared the fruit, sweet mango, soft banana, the cool taste of coconut, and felt the juice run over their hands. The islanders laughed at their awkwardness, and the sailors laughed too, the sound carrying across the beach until it melted into the rhythm of the tide. In those moments, nothing else existed but the warmth of sunlight and the whisper of leaves. The sky stretched endless and blue, the kind of blue that seemed alive, shifting, breathing, infinite. A light wind moved through the trees, bending them slightly, brushing the tops of the flowers that grew wild near the edge of the forest. The scent of hibiscus drifted across the sand, soft as a memory, and butterflies appeared, yellow, white, pale orange, their wings trembling as they moved from blossom to blossom. Time passed unnoticed, marked only by the shadows changing shape along the ground. The sailors felt no need to measure it. They had left clocks behind on the ship, and here time belonged to the rhythm of the sea. The islanders taught them small things: how to weave leaves into rope, how to catch rainwater in broad shells, how to read the colors of the sky before a storm. The sailors, in return, showed them the shine of polished metal, the way a compass needle turned, the gentle flicker of a lantern flame behind glass. These exchanges were quiet, easy, full of curiosity but never rush. Children followed them with laughter, drawing shapes in the sand with small sticks, offering seashells as gifts. The men accepted them carefully, touched by the simplicity of such gestures. Sometimes, in the heat of noon, everyone rested. The air would grow heavy, the sound of insects rising like a single slow song, the waves stilling into gentle ripples. The sailors lay in the shade, eyes half closed, listening to the island hum around them. They could hear everything: the faint rustle of leaves, the far cry of a bird, the slow sigh of water against stone. It was a sound that belonged to peace itself. They had not known quiet like this in many months, and it filled them without demand, without thought. When evening came, colors softened again. The sun fell toward the horizon, and the sky changed from gold to rose, from rose to violet. The sea reflected it all, folding color into motion until the world seemed made of liquid light. Fires were lit near the village. Thin smoke rose into the cooling air, carrying with it the smell of roasting fruit and wood. The sailors gathered with their hosts, sitting close to the flames, feeling warmth upon their faces. Music began, soft drums made of hollow wood, a rhythm so gentle it seemed to blend with the beating of their hearts. Voices joined, low, melodic, repeating patterns that rolled like waves. The sailors did not know the words, but they felt the meaning in the sound. A song about wind and water, about the endlessness of both. The night unfolded slowly. Stars appeared above the palms one by one, until the sky was filled again with familiar constellations. The sailors pointed to them, naming each star softly, tracing invisible lines across the dark. The islanders watched with quiet wonder, and one of them drew shapes in the sand that matched the sky, connecting stars to stories. The two groups sat side by side, sharing silence, sharing starlight. The fire crackled, the sea breathed, the world seemed whole. When sleep came, it came gently. Some of the sailors lay in hammocks strung between trees, swaying slightly with the night breeze. Others rested upon mats woven from palm leaves, their heads filled with the scent of flowers. The air was cool and kind. From the forest came the chirping of insects, the distant call of something unseen. From the shore came the slow rhythm of waves meeting sand. Together, these sounds wove a lullaby that needed no voice. The men closed their eyes, their breathing deep and even. The weight of months at sea dissolved completely. The mornings were all the same, and that sameness was comfort. The first light touched the mountains, mist lifted from the valleys, dew clung to every leaf like tiny mirrors. Birds began to call, one after another, until the forest shimmered with sound. The sailors woke slowly, stretching, smiling, and washing their faces in the cool water that the islanders brought from nearby streams. Breakfast was fruit, sweet and fragrant, and clear water poured from shells. The island's rhythm never changed, soft, unhurried, endlessly kind. Days blended together. Work was simple, helping mend nets, carrying wood, sharing laughter. There was no command, no fear, only the calm routine of existence. The sailors' skin grew brown beneath the sun. Their hands, once rough from rope, grew smooth from fruit and rest. In the evenings, they sometimes sang in their own tongue, slow songs of home. The islanders listened, smiling, though the words were strange. Then they answered with their own melodies, and the music mingled until no one could tell which song had begun the night. Rain came sometimes, soft and warm, falling straight from a grey sky. The drops pattered on leaves and shoulders, cool at first, then pleasant. Children ran through it laughing. Adults stood beneath trees, eyes half closed, letting the rain wash away the heat of the day. The sailors learned to love those moments, the smell of wet earth, the silver shine upon the sand, the way the sea darkened to green. When the rain passed, sunlight returned brighter than before, and everything sparkled as though the island had been renewed. The nights that followed were quieter still. The moon hung low over the water, large and golden, its light stretching in a single trembling path across the bay. The sailors sat by the shore, speaking little. They watched the waves move in slow procession, each one folding softly into the next. The islanders brought more flowers, more laughter, more gentle stories told in gestures and smiles. Every sound was part of the same calm. The sigh of the tide, the hum of life, the soft crackle of distant fire. Time no longer had meaning. The sailors did not count the days or mark the hours. The world had narrowed to the island, the sea, and the sky. The ship rested at anchor, its reflection rippling beneath the stars. Occasionally they rowed out to it, only to feel the boards beneath their feet again, then returned to the warmth of land. The sea had been their home once, but now it felt like memory, gentle, distant, almost unreal. On the island, life continued in a perfect circle, morning, noon, night. Each one flowed into the next, unbroken. The men found peace in repetition, in the certainty that tomorrow would look and sound and feel the same. They had crossed the great ocean to reach this place, and now they drifted not upon water, but upon stillness itself. The island held them softly, like a mother holds a sleeping child. When they finally lay down each night, the world seemed to breathe around them. Trees, waves, wind, and stars moving together in perfect rhythm. They listened until thought dissolved. The song of the island carried them downward into sleep, deep and dreamless, where the only motion was the slow turning of the earth beneath the sea. The unusual exchange when iron became precious. The days drifted softly across the island, one melting into another like clouds moving through a slow sky, and the sailors no longer thought of time in the way they once did at sea. The air was warm, scented with fruit and salt, and the sea stretched in a calm embrace around the bay. The people of Tahiti came and went freely, walking from the forest to the beach, paddling their slender canoes, smiling at the strangers who had become familiar guests. Each morning began with light laughter and quiet gifts, fruits, shells, flowers, carried in woven baskets that shone with dew. The sailors in return offered small objects from the ship, bits of cloth or beads, tokens without weight. Everything flowed with gentle balance. Then one afternoon, something changed, not in feeling, but in the soft curiosity that stirred beneath it. A man from the island, tall and calm, pointed toward a hammer left upon the sand. His eyes lingered not on the handle, but on the metal that caught the sun. He asked, in a voice like wind passing through leaves, to see it closer. A sailor handed it to him, smiling, and the man turned it slowly in his hands, his fingers tracing the cool surface, the edges that glimmered faintly. Others gathered around, their faces full of wonder, touching it lightly as if it were alive. Iron to them was not a thing of use or burden, it was a kind of mystery. It shone like water, yet held firm like stone. They had never shaped such material before, never known its weight, its strength, its cold perfection. To the British sailors, iron was nothing extraordinary. It was the quiet foundation of everything they knew. Nails that held the ship's frame, tools that carved wood, hooks that caught fish. It was a thing so common they barely noticed its presence. Yet here, under the open sky of Tahiti, it became something else entirely. It became wonder made visible. The man lifted the hammer toward the sun and smiled. He spoke softly to the others, and laughter rippled through the group. Soon one of them brought a piece of fruit, ripe and golden, and placed it near the sailor's feet, gesturing toward the iron again. The sailor looked confused at first, then amused, then quietly moved to trade. He offered a small iron nail, nothing more than the size of his thumb, and the man accepted it with a look of pure joy. He turned it over in his hands, eyes wide, the way one might look at a jewel. The exchange was light, effortless, filled with laughter that needed no translation. Word spread quickly across the shore. The people of Tahiti began to come more often, carrying baskets of fruit, flowers, shells, woven mats, each gift offered with calm generosity. In return, they asked only for the small glint of metal that caught the sun, a hook, a piece of chain, a hinge from a chest, a single nail from a wooden beam. The sailors, amused and gentle, found pleasure in these trades. To them it was nothing, a fair exchange for the warmth of friendship and the sweetness of the island's fruit. They laughed as they searched the ship for more small pieces, bringing them ashore with light hearts. The exchanges continued in this way for days, perhaps weeks, though no one counted. The rhythm of giving and receiving became part of daily life, as natural as the tides. There were no arguments, no demands, only soft voices, bright smiles, the quiet meeting of two worlds. The Tahitians would arrive in the morning, paddling over calm water, their canoes decorated with flowers that drifted behind them like petals on the tide. The sailors would meet them on the sand, holding out the gleam of iron, nails polished smooth, small blades dulled with age, bits of metal whose edges still caught light like mirrors. Each trade carried joy, not greed. Each laugh lingered in the air long after the sound had gone. Iron took on a life of its own. It was no longer a tool, but a symbol, something rare and almost sacred. The islanders admired it not for what it could do, but for what it was. Strong, lasting, gleaming like sunlight trapped in stone. Some wore small pieces as ornaments around their necks. Others used them to carve patterns into wood, shaping the images of birds, waves, and stars. They found new meaning in the material, blending it gently into their world without losing their rhythm of calm. For the sailors, these moments were peaceful, even comforting. They enjoyed the simplicity of the trade, the smiles that came with it, the feeling of connection beyond words. The island had changed their sense of need. The sharpness of their old discipline, the sound of orders shouted across the deck, the constant measurement of time, all of it seemed to fade. Here, each action moved with ease, without plan. The exchange of a nail for a garland of flowers felt perfectly balanced, as if the world itself had agreed upon its fairness. Some evenings, after the day's quiet trades were done, they sat together near the shore, the sailors and the islanders side by side, watching the last light of the sun turn the sea to gold. They shared the soft silence of twilight, the sound of waves touching the sand. Sometimes a song would rise, a slow hum from the islanders, a melody that carried no words but filled the heart. The sailors listened, eyes half closed, lulled by the rhythm. The scent of fruit hung in the air, the sky deepened to indigo, and the iron, those small pieces of light, rested in the hands of new owners, shining faintly in the fire's glow. In the following days, the curiosity grew. The Tahitians began to notice how the ship itself was bound together, how the great beams met at their edges, how the small heads of nails gleamed in the wood. They touched the hull, gently at first, tracing the smooth lines, marveling at the strength beneath their fingertips. Some pointed, others whispered, their eyes wide with wonder. To them the ship was a mountain of iron and wood, a floating island filled with treasures. The sailors smiled and allowed them to look, proud but calm, unaware of how valuable those simple things had become. From time to time, a few nails were taken directly from the ship, loosened quietly, exchanged for gifts of rare fruit or woven mats of stunning beauty. No harm was meant, no deceit. It was curiosity meeting generosity, a circle of giving that no one wished to break. The sailors noticed, perhaps, but said nothing. The warmth of the island had softened their hearts. They could not bring themselves to anger when the sky was so blue, the wind so kind, the people so gentle. The rhythm of life on Tahiti flowed on, serene and bright. The exchange of metal for fruit, for laughter, for moments of shared understanding became the island's quiet dance. Each day began with the same calm sunrise, the same soft waves folding upon the shore. The sailors found themselves changed, though they did not know it. The island had taught them the art of stillness, of finding joy in the small shimmer of sunlight on metal, of listening to the sea without asking what it meant. At night, the fires glowed along the beach. The air filled with soft voices, the hum of life at peace. The sailors lay upon the sand, feeling the warmth of the day linger beneath them, the cool breath of evening upon their skin. They thought not of the voyage or the maps awaiting completion. They thought only of the quiet beauty of this place, where even a nail could hold wonder, where even an ordinary thing could become precious through touch and kindness. The moon rose slowly, large and low, casting a path of light across the water. The sea shimmered faintly, the palms whispered in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, laughter echoed once more, light, fleeting, carried away by the wind. The ship rested at anchor, patient, silent, watching over the bay. The exchange continued in spirit even as the night deepened, not of things but of calm, of connection, of breath shared between worlds. And beneath the quiet stars, the island and the ship seemed to breathe together, bound not by metal or trade, but by the simple, timeless rhythm of the sea. The missing nails, the gentle sound of wood and wind. Time drifted like a slow tide, unmeasured and unhurried, slipping through the warm days of the island without leaving any trace. The ship rested quietly in the bay, its masts reaching toward the calm sky, sails furled, ropes swaying softly with the rhythm of the breeze. Each morning, sunlight spilled over the deck like honey, gliding across the worn wood that had carried them across so many miles of ocean. The air smelled of salt and fruit and warm tar. The sailors no longer counted the days or thought of distance. The sea, the island, the sky, they had all become part of the same still breath, steady and endless. In that quiet rhythm, something small began to change, so gently that no one noticed at first. It began with a single nail, a little piece of metal, dull at the head from salt and time. A sailor loosened it from an old plank, smiling to himself, and slipped it into his pocket. That evening on the beach, he traded it for a garland of flowers and a small wooden carving shaped like a bird. The trade was soft, almost ceremonial. No words were needed. Both sides smiled, and the sea whispered approval as it folded against the shore. The next day, another sailor did the same, and then another. The nails, small and simple, had become gifts of quiet beauty. They shone faintly in the sun, and the islanders admired them as treasures from another world. The sailors, warmed by kindness, saw no harm in parting with a few. There were so many, they thought, more than enough to hold the ship together. What difference could one make, or two, or 10? The ship was strong, built to withstand storms and time itself. And so the small exchanges continued, unnoticed and uncounted, each one as light as the breeze that moved through the palms. Inside the hull, the spaces where the nails once rested were hardly visible. The wood held fast, stubborn and sure, as if it too believed in its own endurance. When the tide rose and the ship rocked gently, the sound of water against its side was soft, steady, almost like breathing. It creaked a little, the way all ships do after long journeys. A murmur here, a whisper there, nothing that spoke of danger. The men who slept within the wooden walls heard those sounds at night and found them comforting, the voice of the ship itself, familiar and loyal. But slowly, quietly, the creaks began to change. When the wind shifted at dusk, a new tone joined the familiar song of ropes and timbers, a faint sigh, high and thin, like a whisper through a hollow reed. It was not alarming, only different. Some noticed, then forgot. The sound seemed part of the evening, part of the ship's natural language. They had learned to trust its voice. The ocean was calm, the island kind, the days filled with sunlight. Nothing could break that peace. The captain walked the deck in the afternoons, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes soft as he looked toward the hills. The air shimmered with heat. Birds drifted lazily above the trees. He heard the creak beneath his feet and smiled, thinking it only the ship stretching in rest. The timbers were old, the voyage had been long. A sound here or there was nothing to fear. He paused to watch the water slip past the hull, green and golden, reflecting clouds that moved as slowly as dreams. Below deck, the air was cool and dim. Light filtered through cracks in the planks, creating thin, golden lines across the floor. Barrels stood neatly in rows, ropes coiled in corners. A faint smell of salt and oil hung in the air. The sailors moved softly, their footsteps muffled. Now and then a hammer tapped, or a drawer opened, or a laugh echoed faintly, carried upward by the stillness. Among the shadows, gaps where nails had once been began to glint faintly with the reflection of the sea. No one looked closely enough to notice. The missing pieces were too small, too scattered to mean anything on their own. When the evening came, the wind rose a little. The sails stirred, brushing against the masts with a sigh like silk. The ropes swayed and sang their low, slow music. The ship shifted slightly, settling against the gentle tug of the tide. A board creaked again, softer this time, and then another answered, like two old friends whispering secrets. The sailors heard it and smiled, lulled by the rhythm. They had grown used to every sound, the hum of wood, the faint groan of ropes, the gentle knock of waves against the hull. It was the music of their home. The island glowed under the fading sun. From the beach, smoke curled into the air, carrying the scent of roasting fruit. The sailors watched from the deck, some leaning against the rail, some sitting with arms folded across their knees. They spoke little. The quiet stretched between them, not empty but full of contentment. Behind them, the ship breathed in the slow language of wood and wind, each sound folding into the next, seamless, soft, eternal. At night, the moon laid a silver path across the water. The ship shimmered faintly, its reflection trembling beneath the waves. The island slept, fires fading to embers. From the rigging came the faintest rattle, then silence. The timbers murmured again, long and low, and the sound echoed faintly through the still air. A few sailors stirred in their hammocks, half awake, then settled again. The sound was no threat, only comfort. The voice of a vessel alive, swaying gently in her dreams. Days passed this way, slow and golden. The missing nails became part of the island's memory, part of the quiet exchanges that no one spoke about. In the morning, the ship floated upon a sea so calm it seemed made of glass. The reflection of its masts reached deep below, unbroken. The sailors rowed ashore with small gifts of metal and returned with fruit and flowers, laughter lingering behind them. The cycle continued, endless and kind, yet sometimes when the breeze turned inland and met the heat of the forest, it carried with it a new tone, a faint rattle, a distant hum, the sound of wood shifting upon itself. The sailors heard it, but smiled unbothered. The sea was gentle, the sky clear. The world felt too soft for worry. They trusted the calm, trusted the slow, steady rhythm that had carried them this far. The ship, their old companion, had never failed them. It would not fail now. In the afternoons, shadows lengthened along the deck. The sun painted the ship in layers of amber and gold. Dust motes drifted through the light, turning lazily. Somewhere below, the boards flexed with the tide, a small sigh escaping between them. It sounded almost human, a whispering voice lost in the hum of the day. The sailors barely noticed. The world had grown too beautiful for attention to small things. Every breath of wind, every shimmer of light seemed to promise safety. The sea remained smooth, a vast field of silver blue stretching beyond sight. The waves touched the hull with gentle rhythm, one after another, a heartbeat that never faltered. When night returned, the same sounds filled the dark. The soft groan of timber, the sigh of ropes, the quiet murmur of air between planks. The ship spoke in the language of calm. The captain sometimes stood by the wheel long after the others had gone below. He watched the moon slide between clouds and listened to the sounds beneath his feet. He could hear the faint creaks, the whispers, the sighs. They were not warnings to him, they were memories, reminders of every voyage, every night spent between the stars and sea. He smiled to himself, thinking the ship was only settling, resting, breathing. He whispered a word of gratitude to her, for her patience, her endurance, her grace, and turned his eyes toward the horizon, where the sky met the sleeping ocean. The days flowed onward, each one a soft repetition of light and warmth. The islanders came and went, the sailors laughed and rested, the ship floated and breathed. The missing nails were forgotten, scattered between kindness and curiosity, between friendship and sea wind. And when the evening winds returned, brushing through the rigging, the ship answered with her quiet voice, wood against wind, sound against silence, the soft language of a heart that still believed itself whole. And so beneath the wide blue sky and the endless calm, the vessel swayed gently in her anchorage, alive with whispers, filled with the music of her own being. The sailors slept soundly within her wooden arms. The sea breathed against her sides, and somewhere deep within the timbers, where the missing nails once rested, the smallest sound, a sigh, a hum, a note of the wind itself, drifted upward like a lullaby, reminding the night that even the strongest things can sing softly when the world is still. The captain's inspection. The silence of understanding. The afternoon light rested gently upon the deck, a soft golden glow that touched every rope, every plank, every piece of the ship that had carried them across endless water. The air was warm and steady, filled with the scent of salt and faint traces of resin where the wood met sunlight. The sea below was quiet, almost asleep, moving only enough to rock the vessel in slow, drowsy rhythm. From the shore came the distant sound of laughter, the hum of life on the island, but aboard the ship, all was still. The captain stepped from his cabin, his boots sounding softly against the wood, the rhythm calm and even. He walked without hurry, without command, his eyes tracing the familiar lines of his vessel. The rail polished smooth by countless hands, the ropes that hung in perfect arcs, the sails folded neatly above, resting like white wings. He paused near the mast and laid a hand against it. The wood was warm beneath his palm, alive with the faint vibration of the ocean's breath. For a moment, he closed his eyes, listening. The ship spoke in whispers, the soft creak of planks, the long sigh of the wind through rigging, the distant thump of a wave against the hull. It was a language he had known all his life, a voice older than his own memory. But now, within that gentle song, there was a note he did not remember. Something small and hollow, a space where sound met silence and lingered. He frowned slightly, not with worry but with curiosity, and began to walk again. At the edge of the deck, near where the ropes coiled in shadows, he knelt down. His fingers brushed across the seams of the planks. There were tiny gaps there, no larger than a fingernail, where the nails should have gleamed dark and solid. He ran his hand along the wood, moving slowly as though searching for the pulse of something unseen. The boards felt different, looser, gentler beneath his touch. He pressed lightly, and the faintest creak answered him, as soft as breath. He stayed still for a long moment, feeling the air shift around him, and then rose again, turning his gaze toward the sea. Behind him, one of the shipwrights followed, a quiet man with eyes that always seemed to listen more than speak. His steps were measured, his tools clinking faintly in a leather pouch at his side. The captain nodded once, and the man began to examine the same seams, running his fingers over the planks, tapping lightly with a small piece of wood. The sound came back hollow in places, full in others. He did not need to speak. The captain already understood. They moved together along the deck, neither in haste nor alarm, pausing here and there to touch, to listen, to feel. The ship sighed beneath them, a long and patient sound, like a body breathing in its sleep. The sunlight shifted slowly, sliding down the mast and pooling in amber streaks along the floorboards. The men's shadows stretched long and thin, reaching toward the bow where the sea shimmered in gold. Around them, the air was full of small, living sounds. The distant call of a seabird, the faint flap of canvas, the murmur of water slipping along the hull. It was a peaceful silence, the kind that carried understanding without need for words. The captain straightened and looked toward the horizon, where the island lay still beneath a haze of heat. His face was calm, his eyes steady. There was no anger, no regret, only the soft awareness of what had passed. He turned again, watching the shipwright trace a missing nail with the tip of his finger. A smile, faint and almost invisible, touched the captain's lips. The ship still stood, still breathed, still belonged to the sea. Nothing was lost that could not be held by care. They continued their quiet walk together, examining the beams, the seams, the ribs of the vessel. Occasionally, the shipwright would nod or hum softly to himself, noting places where the wood shifted when the wind leaned against it. They spoke not a single word. The air between them was full of meaning without sound. Each step across the deck was careful, deliberate, full of respect, not for what was broken, but for what still endured. The captain reached out once more and pressed his hand to the railing. Beneath the sun's warmth, the wood felt like skin, alive, listening. A few sailors watched from a distance, leaning against barrels and ropes. They understood without asking. Their faces were quiet, open, touched by the same calm that held the air. They, too, saw the missing nails, the loosened seams, and they felt something gentle inside them. Not guilt, not fear, only the slow realization that every gift carries a small echo in return. They had traded their iron for joy, for laughter, for friendship, and now the ship sang a softer song because of it. The sound of it was not reproach but memory, a reminder of how easily the world shares and changes. The wind moved through the rigging, carrying the faint scent of flowers from the island. The captain looked up toward the sails and listened. The canvas shifted slightly, whispering as it caught the breeze. The ropes swayed in answer, their soft creaks weaving with the sigh of the wood. It was all part of the same music. The ocean, the air, the ship, and the hearts of those who lived upon it. For a moment, the captain felt that the ship itself understood what had been done, and that understanding brought peace, not pain. The shipwright knelt once more and touched the edge of a plank, feeling where the wood had begun to ease apart. He pressed it gently, then looked toward the captain and nodded. The gesture said enough. The captain nodded back. No orders followed, no commands to replace, to repair, to punish. There was no rush, no alarm, only the soft hum of the sea beneath them. The ship floated as steadily as ever, her shadow trembling upon the water. Above, the sky deepened toward evening. The color of the light shifted from gold to rose, then to the soft blue of dusk. The world seemed to hold its breath in that hour between day and night. The captain remained at the rail, watching the horizon fade into haze. Around him, the sailors moved quietly, gathering ropes, coiling lines, closing hatches. Their movements were slow and certain, guided by instinct. The sound of their work blended with the voice of the ship, the creak, the sigh, the whisper, until all of it became one continuous tone, the low hum of life still moving forward. When the sun finally slipped below the edge of the world, the light upon the sea turned silver. The waves reflected the first faint glimmer of stars, trembling like lanterns caught in water. The captain took one last slow walk across the deck, his hand brushing the railing, his eyes resting on the timbers that had carried them through storms and calm alike. The shipwright followed behind him, tools silent in their pouch. They stopped at the bow, where the wind touched their faces and the air smelled faintly of flowers and salt. Neither spoke. The moment did not need words. The ship swayed gently as though breathing in sleep. Somewhere below, the loosened wood murmured again, not loud, not sharp, only the softest sound like a sigh beneath the waves. The captain heard it, and instead of worry, he felt something like affection. The ship was alive, and all living things carried their marks of change. The missing nails were part of its story now, as much as the wind, the salt, the stars above. He looked once more toward the island, where fires flickered faintly through the trees. The glow touched the water, thin lines of gold trembling in the dark. The sailors gathered near the mast, their voices low, their faces gentle. No one spoke of the missing iron. No one needed to. The silence was complete, deep, and kind. The captain placed a hand upon the wood beside him, feeling its warmth against his skin, and whispered a single word. Not command, not question, but gratitude. The sea answered with a sigh that rolled softly through the hull. Above, the sails fluttered once, then fell still. The ship rested, whole in her imperfection, quiet beneath the vastness of sky. And in that silence, a silence filled with wind and water, with memory and calm. Understanding settled like dust upon light, soft, weightless, and eternal. Consequences and reflection, the stillness of realization. The days began to turn again, their edges blurring softly as the time to leave drew near. The sun rose as it always had, spilling gold upon the water, touching the ship, where it rested quietly, at anchor. The palms along the shore moved with the same easy rhythm, their leaves whispering in the morning wind. Yet among the sailors, a different stillness had settled, a silence made not of worry, but of awareness. The island had given them peace, warmth, laughter, and calm, and now it was time to prepare for the long stretch of ocean that waited beyond the horizon. The ship, their companion through every mile of wave and wind, stood ready, but changed, not broken, not frail, only altered by the small kindnesses and trades that had filled the passing days. The captain rose early each morning, his steps slow upon the deck. He walked with the steady care of one who listens more than he speaks. The air smelled faintly of resin and salt, the familiar perfume of the sea. Around him the men worked quietly, gathering tools, tightening ropes, hammering small wedges of wood into the seams where nails had once held firm. Their movements were patient and sure, guided not by fear, but by the soft understanding that things could be mended, that the world always offered a way forward. The sound of their labor was gentle, the tap of wood, the murmur of voices, the long exhale of wind through the rigging. It was the music of rebuilding, calm and rhythmic, filled with quiet acceptance. They had learned how to make do with less. Where iron had once gleamed, they placed smooth dowels of wood, tied tight with rope and sealed with pitch. It was not perfect, but it was enough. The ship creaked approvingly as if grateful for their touch, for their care. The deck glowed beneath the sun, the sea glimmered with the reflection of clouds. Each sound, the rustle of canvas, the hush of waves, the thud of a hammer, carried through the warm air like a heartbeat. The islanders came once more, bringing fruit and garlands and soft farewells. They stood along the water's edge, their faces calm, their smiles bright. They did not ask for more iron, and the sailors did not offer. The exchange between them had changed. It had turned from curiosity to connection, from trade to gratitude. The sailors bowed their heads, their hearts heavy and light at once. The sea would take them away soon, but a part of the island, its scent, its laughter, its stillness, would remain in them long after the sails were raised. When the work was done, the captain gathered his crew upon the deck. They stood together beneath the bright sky, the air shimmering with heat and salt. The island lay behind them, the ocean ahead. The captain looked from face to face, saying nothing. Words felt unnecessary. Each man knew what had been lost and what had been found. They had given away nails, small and ordinary things, and in return had received lessons that no map could hold. The weight of gentleness, the quiet truth of balance, the reminder that even the smallest parts of a whole have their place in keeping it strong. As they prepared to depart, a soft breeze rose from the shore, carrying the scent of flowers and earth. It brushed across their faces like a farewell. The sails stirred, the ropes trembled. The hull gave a single long sigh as if waking from a dream. The islanders waved from the beach, their voices carrying faintly over the water. Not loud, not sorrowful, just a tone of calm farewell. The sailors waved back, their movements slow and steady, their hearts full. The anchor was lifted, heavy and wet with seaweed. The oars dipped into the clear water, pushing the ship gently away from land. The shoreline began to drift backward, the palms growing smaller, the hills fading into a soft blue mist. The ship moved quietly, her patched seams and replaced wood, holding true beneath the touch of the sea. She was not perfect, but she was alive, carried forward by wind and will. The captain stood at the helm, eyes steady on the horizon, his hand resting upon the worn wood of the wheel. No one spoke of the missing nails or of the quiet exchanges that had taken them. The lesson did not need to be said, it lived in their movements, in the careful tying of a rope, in the way each man checked the strength of a beam before stepping forward. They understood now that strength was not only in metal or in wood, but in attention, in care, in the steady rhythm of work done with respect. What had been lost had not been wasted, it had been transformed into understanding. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, smooth as silk beneath the morning sun. The ship glided upon it with grace, her patched sides whispering softly to the waves. The wind filled the sails in long, even breaths, and the ropes hummed with quiet contentment. The men moved easily about their tasks, their voices low, their laughter subdued but warm. The calm was deep, like the deep sleep of the ocean itself. As the island disappeared behind them, the light upon the water began to change. It shimmered with the memory of green hills and bright fruit, of hands that had traded and hearts that had opened. The world felt wider now, yet also closer, as though every breath connected sky, sea, and soul in one continuous rhythm. The captain watched the horizon, the faint line where the world seemed to fold into itself. He thought not of regret or loss, but of balance, of how the smallest things held the greatest weight when placed in their rightful place. The ship sailed on, and the men rested in the warmth of afternoon. The ocean moved around them like a slow dream, carrying the scent of salt and distance. The timbers beneath their feet creaked softly, familiar and forgiving. They trusted the ship as one trusts the earth beneath their steps. The missing nails no longer mattered. What mattered was the care they had given, the patience they had learned, the quiet strength that came from simply being present. Evening approached with the softness of silk. The sky deepened to gold, then to rose, then to the deep, endless blue of twilight. The first stars appeared, faint and trembling above the masts. The captain stood at the rail, his eyes tracing the path of the sea. Around him, the crew settled into their calm routine. Some coiled ropes, some tended lamps, others leaned against the railing, watching the fading glow of the island far behind them. The world was quiet, vast, and kind. When night came, the sails turned pale beneath the moonlight. The ocean reflected the sky, and the ship seemed to float between two worlds, one of water, one of stars. The men lay upon the deck, eyes half closed, listening to the sounds that surrounded them. The gentle slap of waves, the slow sigh of the hull, the steady whisper of wind through canvas. Each sound folded into the next until all became one long exhale, the breath of the earth itself. In that quiet, the lesson rested like a feather upon the surface of their thoughts. It did not demand, did not lecture. It simply existed, soft and steady. They had learned that even the smallest piece of a whole carries meaning, that peace itself can make one forget what holds it together. But the sea had reminded them, not with anger, not with storm, but with the lightest touch of absence, the faint whisper of change. They understood now, and in that understanding was peace. The captain looked once more at his ship. The patched planks, the tightened ropes, the faint shimmer of moonlight on the rails. He smiled, a quiet curve of gratitude. The world was still turning, the wind still kind, the ship still strong enough to move forward. That was all that mattered. And as the night deepened, the waves rocked them gently, the stars hummed above, and the sea whispered its timeless lullaby. The air cooled, fragrant with salt and distance. The men drifted to sleep, their dreams soft and wordless, their hearts calm. The ship sailed on beneath the great sky, her voice a low, continuous hum, the sound of understanding, of forgiveness, of the world returning once more to stillness. The wind carried them onward, light and endless. The island was gone now, but its spirit lingered, in the smell of flowers that lived within their memories, in the softness of their movements, in the quiet reverence that had taken root within them. The missing nails were forgotten, yet the knowledge they had left behind remained, a silent bond between wood and sea, between human hands and the patient rhythm of the world. And so the ship drifted forward into the night, steady and calm, her patched seams glowing faintly beneath the stars. The sea folded around her like a cradle, rocking her toward the horizon. The wind whispered through the sails, slow and low, like a mother's breath over a sleeping child. And the men, wrapped in warmth and peace, dreamed not of loss but of balance, of how even the smallest act, the gentlest awareness, can hold the weight of the world steady. Return to the sea. The echo of Tahiti. Morning came with a softness that seemed to float between the sky and the sea. The light rose slowly, spreading like silk across the water, tinting it in hues of silver and pale gold. The ship rested quietly near the shore, her mast still, her sails hanging loose in the gentle wind. The island of Tahiti lay calm behind her, draped in its veil of green and mist, the peaks softened by the light of dawn. Along the beach, the people gathered, men, women, and children, carrying flowers, fruit, and woven garlands that shimmered faintly with dew. Their laughter was quiet, their smiles kind, their movements unhurried, as though time itself had decided to move slower for this final morning. The sailors stood along the deck, watching, each man still in silence, each carrying something unseen within him, a memory, a sound, a breath of air that would never be forgotten. The wind was gentle as it came down from the hills, carrying with it the scent of flowers and the salt of the ocean. The islanders began to sing, their voices rising in a low, melodic rhythm that seemed to blend with the pulse of the waves. The melody had no words that the sailors understood, yet the feeling within it was clear. Farewell, gratitude, peace. The song floated across the water, threading through the rigging, wrapping itself around the ship like a soft ribbon. The sailors stood motionless, their hearts full, their eyes following the slow movement of the waves. When it was time to go, the captain raised his hand and the anchor began to lift. The sound was slow and steady, the grind of chain, the splash of water, the creak of wood adjusting to motion once again. The sails stirred, filling with the wind's first breath, and the ship leaned slightly, as if waking from a long dream. The islanders waved from the beach, throwing handfuls of flowers into the sea. The blossoms landed upon the surface, bright and delicate, floating like fragments of sunlight. As the tide carried them outward, they drifted toward the ship, swirling in small circles, following her path. The sailors leaned over the rails, watching the petals spin and scatter, their colors shining against the blue. The ship began to move. Slowly at first, her hull pushing through the soft water, leaving behind a gentle wake that shimmered in the morning light. The island grew smaller with each breath of wind. The hills became shapes of shadow, the palm trees melted into a thin green line along the horizon. The song from the shore faded into distance until it was no longer sound but memory. The sea opened ahead, wide and glimmering, endless once more. The sailors stood together along the deck, faces turned toward the receding shore. No one spoke. Their silence was full, not empty, but overflowing with calm. They watched until the island was nothing more than a small blue haze against the light, a dream dissolving back into the horizon. Then one by one they turned toward the sea, toward the open expanse waiting to receive them. The wind brushed their faces with cool fingers. The ship creaked softly, adjusting to her old rhythm, her old song. The ocean greeted her like an old friend, waves rising gently to meet her sides, whispering against her hull. The flowers that had followed the ship began to spread across the surface of the sea, drifting farther apart. Some were caught in the ship's wake and pulled gently under, others floated free, carried toward the horizon. The water glittered around them, carrying their colors away, scattering them into the distance until they seemed like stars upon the sea. The men watched them fade, the petals spinning lazily, the water folding them into its embrace. It was not sadness they felt, but stillness, the kind of peace that comes from knowing something beautiful has passed without loss. The sails filled fully now, their white curves bright against the sky. The ropes hummed with the breath of the wind, a low music that joined with the rhythm of the waves. The ship tilted slightly, finding her balance once more. Beneath her, the water moved in slow undulations, deep and calm. The men resumed their quiet duties, adjusting ropes, coiling lines, checking the masts, each motion gentle, practiced, unhurried. The sea around them was vast and smooth, shining like glass. The sound of the island was gone now, replaced by the eternal murmur of the ocean. As the day grew brighter, the horizon spread wide and clean before them. The sky was a pale, endless blue, and the air shimmered with light. The ship moved easily, carried by the wind's quiet strength. The men found their rhythm again, though it felt softer than before, as if the island had left its calm within them. They spoke little. Their faces were peaceful, their eyes clear. Some sat upon the deck, polishing tools or mending ropes. Others leaned against the rail, watching the waves slip past. The sea had a voice again, a steady whisper that filled every space, every breath. The captain stood by the helm, his hands resting upon the worn wood. He looked ahead where the sea met the sky, and then back once more toward where the island had been. There was nothing to see now but light and distance. Yet within that space he could still feel Tahiti, not as land but as memory, as warmth, as the soft echo of something that had touched them all. He smiled faintly, a quiet curve that held no sadness. The ship beneath him felt alive, content. She had been mended with care, her seams held by patience and understanding. The wind hummed through her rigging, the sea slid smoothly beneath her hull. Everything was steady again. By midday, the island had vanished completely. Only the sky remained, the great blue mirror that reflected the calm within their hearts. The men ate in silence, the sound of their laughter soft and low. The deck shone beneath the sun, the air shimmered with salt. Somewhere below, the timbers creaked gently, not with strain but with ease, like a sigh of satisfaction. The ocean stretched in every direction, vast, serene, alive. The ship was part of it now, one breath among many in the endless song of the sea. The afternoon drifted on. Shadows moved slowly across the deck, shifting with the sun. The waves rose and fell with perfect rhythm, each one folding softly into the next. The sailors lay resting, their heads tilted toward the sky, eyes half closed. The world was reduced to sound and motion. Wind, wood, and water, all moving together, all breathing as one. The ship no longer felt heavy or burdened. She glided as though guided by invisible hands, her patched seams whispering against the current. Evening came gently, spreading its color across the world. The sun lowered itself into the water, its reflection stretching like a path of gold. The sky turned soft shades of amber and rose, and the air cooled to a sweet hush. The sailors gathered quietly at the rail, watching the horizon burn with light. No one spoke. The only sounds were the sigh of the waves and the slow flap of sails. The captain stood among them, his gaze steady, his heart calm. As the last edge of the sun disappeared, the first stars appeared above the masts. The sea darkened to deep blue, smooth and endless. The flowers that had followed them were gone now, dissolved into the tide, but their memory lingered. The scent, the color, the quiet kindness. The men felt it still in the air, in their breath, in the sound of the ship's voice as it moved through the calm. Night deepened, and the ship sailed on. The sails turned silver under the moon, and the deck glowed faintly with reflected light. The sea stretched around them in perfect stillness, the stars mirrored upon its surface. The men moved softly, their voices low, their hearts light. Tahiti had faded into the horizon, but its peace remained, not behind them, not ahead, but within, carried like a quiet flame that would not fade. The wind shifted once, sighing across the deck. The ship answered with a low creak, the language of old wood and patience. The sea accepted her movement, folding beneath her, lifting her forward. The sailors closed their eyes, listening. There was nothing to fear, nothing to want. The ocean held them, the stars watched over them. The memory of the island sang somewhere deep beneath the surface of their dreams. The ship moved on, slow and steady, toward a horizon that never seemed to end. And as the night deepened, the world fell silent, except for the soft conversation of wind and water. The captain closed his eyes for a moment and breathed in the air, clean, endless, alive. The sea whispered its ancient promise that everything returns, that everything continues, that peace, once found, never truly leaves. And so they sailed beneath the stars, carried by memory, by wind, by the quiet rhythm of the world itself, the sound of a journey that had no ending, only calm, only sea, only the soft echo of Tahiti, drifting forever through the heart of the night. The ending, sleep upon the waves. Night descended with a softness that seemed to wrap the ship in silk. The sky deepened to a quiet shade of blue, vast and endless, holding the faint shimmer of 1,000 stars. The moon rose slowly above the horizon, its light gentle, pale and kind. It spilled across the water like a long exhale, turning each ripple into silver. The sails caught that glow, trembling softly as the ship moved with the tide. Everything was calm, everything was slow, everything seemed to breathe together. The sea, the air, the wood, and the sleeping hearts aboard. The sound of the waves was steady, rhythmic, as if the ocean itself had learned the art of a lullaby. It rolled beneath the hull in long, even strokes, touching the ship's sides with care, whispering to her to rest, to drift, to dream. The men lay scattered across the deck, their bodies still, their minds untethered. Some slept beneath the open sky, faces lit by moonlight, their breaths rising and falling in the same rhythm as the sea. Others leaned against the masts, half awake, half dreaming, their thoughts dissolving like mist. The night air was cool and clean, tasting faintly of salt and wind. From somewhere deep within the hull came the low hum of wood settling, a sound like a sigh. The ship was alive in her own quiet way, cradling her crew, keeping time with the pulse of the world. The captain stood for a while near the rail, his eyes resting on the horizon. There was nothing to see but the soft line where sky and sea met, nothing to hear but the endless whisper of water. It was enough. He felt the peace that comes when there is nothing left to chase, nothing left to fix, only the quiet continuation of motion. After a moment he closed his eyes and let the sound of the sea fill him completely. When he opened them again, the world seemed slower, gentler, more forgiving. One by one, the men drifted deeper into sleep. Their dreams came softly, filled with warm air and green leaves, with laughter and sunlight and the memory of Tahiti. They saw the island as it had been, the pale sand beneath their feet, the shimmer of morning light on calm water, the sound of distant voices calling across the shore. The memory was neither sharp nor heavy. It moved like a feather, touching them lightly, before fading into the rhythm of their dreams. The sea continued to sing to them, each wave a quiet word, each breath of wind a gentle caress. The ship sailed on, though no one watched her course. The stars guided her, the moon kept her company. Beneath her, the deep ocean turned and sighed, holding her steady in its vast, patient arms. The night grew deeper, softer, stiller. The sails hung quiet, the ropes swayed like slow pendulums, and the deck glimmered under the pale light. There was no beginning, no ending, only calm, only rest, only the eternal voice of the sea. And in that calm the world itself seemed to fall asleep. The sky, the stars, the waves, the wooden bones of the ship, all breathed together, one long, endless exhale. The journey was complete. The island was behind them. The sea would carry them onward, but for now there was nothing more to seek. Only the hush of the tide, the warmth of dreams, and the peace of drifting into sleep upon the waves. My dear friend, now that the story has reached its quiet end, let your thoughts rest like leaves upon calm water. Breathe slowly, feel the weight of the day melt away, and let the soft rhythm of the sea carry you into dreams. The world is peaceful. The night is kind. Close your eyes, let go, and drift. Sleep well, dear one. Sleep deeply and sweetly till morning comes.